My world was ending. It was 2018, and all of California was on fire. I was living in a house that was not my own, but that a man that I called Grandpa, who wasn't really my grandpa, owned. But he died the day before I officiated a wedding, and nothing has been okay since then. I spent a lot of my time at swanky, shallow LA parties, or listening to Judy Garland in my bathtub. That wasn't really mine. I was incapable of making any decisions, so I just drank a lot, and I watched a lot of old movies on Not My TV. But the TV of a man, not my not grandpa, but one of his kids, but we don't talk about him anymore. But his TV worked really well despite everything, so it was put to use. I didn't have Wi-Fi, so I spent a lot of the time in Starbucks parking lots down the street from Not My House because I was uninterested in actually going into Starbucks. And I didn't have a washer and dryer, so I did laundry at a friend's house who actually did call Grandpa, and he meant it. I slept most of the time in the guest room of the model home that I made breakfast in most mornings. And the nights that I didn't sleep there, I slept at friends' apartments, away from the fires and the heartbreak and the lack of answers and the abundance of questions. I spent a lot of time cleaning not my messes after moving away from another house that wasn't mine, but that was owned by a woman that I imagined a mother-in-law might look like. She didn't own it either. It was actually paid for by her father, who I didn't call Grandpa, even though that probably would have made more sense. Her son and I loved each other very much. We took care of each other for the best we could, for as long as our hearts and stomachs could stand it. But then one day, we both realized that our broken pieces didn't go together like broken people's broken pieces should. So after 10 years of trying to mend the unmendable, he decided to stay at not his house, and I decided to stay at not mine. I've only ever felt truly home twice in my life. The first is when I dressed up as Dorothy, and I drove to all the houses that I grew up in, begging the question, what is the difference between a house and a home? The act of driving to all of these addresses with different street names and city names and numbers and floor plans and foliage and strangers living in them and not being able to go inside but just stand outside and look up at them with their closed windows and their closed shutters. It felt like going home. And the second time is when I had to pack up not my grandpa's house and my almost mother-in-law's house in less than 10 hours. I slept in 2 different beds and one night and a third the second. I had my entire car packed with photos and files and stuffed animals and electronics and everything that I claimed to care about in the world, and I drove past burning hills in a burning valley, and I felt like I was drowning and alone, and I have never been more afraid in my entire life than in that moment, and a piece of my heart fell into place. And for the second time in my life, I felt home again. The only things I knew I wanted were to be married and have a family. And then my almost sister-in-law found out that she was pregnant, and my almost brother-in-law was getting a divorce, and I realized maybe I didn't want either of those things. That was the year my mother, my real one, came to see me for my birthday for the first time in 11 years. But we kept conversation as not real as possible, so we could just enjoy seeing each other's faces for a few hours and move on to the next phase of our separately frightening yet oddly parallel lives of almost homelessness, but not really almost homelessness, because no one would let that happen, no matter how pathetic or desperate we became, which is simultaneously horribly torturous because of the guilt, but also comforting because of the reasons it's comforting to know that you'll never be homeless. Not my grandma, who I didn't call grandma, but who I called Shirley, was the closest thing at that time to what I considered to be family. I was helping her finish her memoir. She used to be this very famous movie actress, but she had dementia, which made it hard for her to remember names or places in her carousel of memories, and bad arthritis, which made it really hard for her to type. But she had this insatiable drive to tell her story and get it out in the world, and I wanted nothing more than to help her make that happen. She had 2 regrets: not saying what she wanted to her second husband, a man she says that she should not have married, and not traveling more. And mind you, this woman has traveled the world. I've been reading up on flights to London, a place I've always wanted to visit, but never have because of one excuse or another. And I have a feeling that despite my fear of flying, the trip there will be the third time that I'll feel at home. I guess I'm most comfortable when I'm alone and taking risks, or when I'm alone and afraid of doing something, but I have to do it anyway. Either way, I'm alone. And there are very few people or things that are actually mine for real, which may be why I put so much value on the small amount of absurd and unnecessary possessions that I have, because they're mine. For real, they belong with me, and I belong with them. But almost everything else in my life, the things and the people that I spend the most time with, are not mine for real. They're just for now, or not quite, or almost, or just to look at. And the ones that aren't real can't always love me in a healthy way. So to keep myself from being poisoned, I just take them in small doses. But maybe it's time to stop self-medicating. Maybe it's time to try to find something real. According to Capote, when I find the place where my things and I belong together, it'll feel like Tiffany's. But I'd be happy if I just had a working washer and dryer.